welcome to Hex Encountered. I'm Joe. It is time for some gameplay video here. Solitaire game. This is the 12th Battle, the Caporetto campaign 1917. This is from Hexasim and is a Hermann Luttmann design. And as you know, I am a big fan of his games, and we're going to give this one a whirl. This, of course, is a First World War game on the Italian front, which seems to be one of the less used settings, I guess, for First World War games. And you can see the map here. I've pretty much the whole thing. There may be a little bit, yeah, there is a little bit that's off camera at the bottom, like the card deck, which is right here. You do start with the Cadorna deck. Why do I have such a hard time saying this guy's name? Cadorna. As I was saying, Cadorna deck. And then eventually he'll get sacked, and we'll get Diaz in there. And that would also make the British and French available for providing some support to the beleaguered Italian forces here. So in this battle, historically, the Central Powers, Germany and Austro-Hungary, did a pretty good job pushing the Italians back. Basically, this whole area they conquered down to this river line here. So your job as the commander, I guess, of the Central Power forces is to at least duplicate and preferably exceed the historical success of their forces. Now, I did do a first look for this game, and I talked about the rules, and we kind of went through them, not in great depth, but I did want to give you kind of an overview of what they involve. So you see the color coding and the various symbols here that represent the terrain in each area on the map. So this is an area map. It's not hex. And you can see we've got the gray and the kind of purpley gray of the Austrians and the Germans up here. And then the green is the Italian forces. We have our trench line going around this way. And so you have what the game refers to as transit lines. So these lines right here that connect areas to each other. That is the only way you can move from area to area. So you can't jump from, say, here to here because there's no transit line. You would have to go down through here and then there and then there and then there. So that's kind of the way of funneling your forces through specific areas. Obviously, you can see from the topography here on this map that this is a mountainous area, as you would expect in northern Italy. Very mountainous, the Alps. And this guy's turned sideways here. So at setup, they have specified areas. You have a little bit of leeway on the Central Power side as far as determining where to place your forces. So over here, for example, we have the 14th Armée, and it says DE, and therefore we place the 14th Army D unit there, and the 3 and the 4. 3 is the assault firepower, and 4 is the artillery bombardment firepower. Then you've got, as well, you see the 4 and 4. Those represent the morale points and the defense rating. So we'll get into all of that as we play. Just a couple things before we get started here. So your terrain types, you see the mountainous ones. This is mountain, of course. This is a hill. And then you have your cities, which all will have a garrison in it. And we don't know what the garrison strength is until we flip it over. But you see there's a Udine here. There is a garrison there. There's one here in Gorizia. And then you got Venezia down here in Padua and all so on and so forth, right? Then there are also these circles. That's clear terrain. So no big impediment. And then the color coding indicates their supply level from the Central Power standpoint, right? So up here, this is all Central Power territory, right? That's Austria-Hungary up here. So you've got green, which indicates that is supplied. Yellow is limited supply, and red is strained supply. So the further they get from their jump-off points, the more tenuous their supply situation is. Now, that doesn't create as dire a situation as it might sound, and we'll get into that if and when we actually get down here. And if we don't, I'll still talk about what that entails. Now, I did want to talk about the game turn track as well before we start. So up at the top, you see the game turn track. It is a 10-turn game if you're playing the scenario, which is what I have queued up here. Beside that, you have your available CP activation chits. So each of the Central Powers armies, there are 4 of them. Isonzo, and then 10, 11, and 14th. And then an event chit. So you can play that, and we'll get into that here in a minute, but you play those to determine which units you're going to activate. Then there's the activation track. So you can see the odd numbers are Central Power colored. The even ones are Italian colored, and you randomly will seed the activation track with the Italian activations randomly without looking at them. You set them upside down and you turn them over and reveal them when it's their turn to go. Yours, you seed one at a time as the turn progresses. So we will seed one first and then run that activation, etc. You roll for activation points, which tells you how many you spend activation points to do things with your units, as you would expect. And then, of course, there is the event that you can use. So if you roll low, let's say you roll a 2, which really limits what you can do with your units, obviously, then you might elect to use your event chit for that. Of course, if you roll a 2 again later after you've used your event chit, then you're basically out of luck. Then you have your activation points, which is what I just mentioned. So you roll 2 6-sided dice. You can have anything from a 2 to 12 to start with, and then you spend them down and you use the track marker there to count them down as you go. Then you've got your command assets track. We'll talk about that when we're playing, which is basically just different things you can do, like re-roll or things of that nature that you can expend your command assets on to accomplish. Then we have victory points. There are a 1, a 10, and a 100 marker. The goal is 125 in the campaign game in terms of victory points to match the historical. So anything above that, you would be on the winning side. Anything below that, you would have done worse than what the CP did originally, and you would be therefore losing. And then you have the Cadorna dismissed track. And as that moves up through the cards drawn for the allies. As that moves up, they will essentially get closer to firing him, and then eventually he gets dismissed. He's replaced by Diaz, and the Italians become much more effective. So that is a look at our game turn track. Over here you can see you've got the card deck with a discard pile. I've already shuffled the Cadorna deck. The Diaz deck is off to the side at the moment. There's a box for reforming Italian units. And up here in the upper corner, we have the boxes for the German, or I shouldn't say German, I shouldn't say them either. Central Power Forces, heavy artillery, which you can use in a separate phase before activation. And then you've got your available storm battalions that you can also use to assault spaces on the map. And you do pay activation points for those, but they do not count as units for a specific army. There are 3 player aids for the game, and we have event tables, and then the allied army orders for running basically the AI. And then you also have this one, which is your main player aid, because it's got your sequence of play on it and the steps that you will go through to do it. So over here, you can see there's a little box that actually shows it in abbreviated form. And so the first thing you're going to do is you deploy your Allied Army activation chits. Okay. Now that goes on the track that we just saw. And basically, these are the chits right here. So you can shuffle them around, put them on the map, and kind of shuffle them around. You can also put them in a cup and draw them out or whatever. I'm not really concerned about which one is which here, but then we're going to take it and keep it face down like this and put it on the activation track. So it would go in 2, and then 4, 6, 8, and 10. Okay, so I've put out my dice tower. Now the way you do this, the game comes with 6 dice. And when I say the way you do this, I'm talking about the CP activation points phase, which is next. So I'm going to take 2 of these. And we got, look at that. We got 12, and that's fantastic. So here on our activation point track, right, we take this and we move it all the way to 12. So this is a good one. This means I will activate an army because I wouldn't want to waste that roll on an event. So here you can see on our track, on our player aid rather, it says you roll 2 dice, add together, activate 1 eligible marker, 10th, 11th, 14th, Isonzo, or event using the rolled AP total. Now, if we look here, you can see the CP Army activation phase, and these are the costs for doing things. And above that, you've got your heavy artillery and storm battalion, okay, that you can do before you do this. But here you see this is what your AP costs are. So to move, you'd spend 2 for crossing a bridge. So bridges obviously are at rivers. So down here, here's a bridge. If you were moving from this clear space to this one, it would cost you 2 action points, right? Then 1 for city, hills, or mountains without a bridge. So if I were to try, well, there's really no open spaces for, because you can't move into an area with an enemy. You have to do an assault, which is different than movement. But if this guy, say, wanted to move here, that would cost him 1 action point. And then 0 is clear. So a unit that's in a clear space or moving to a clear space, like say this guy, garrisons don't move, but if this was a unit, he can move here or here for free. So that's a pretty sweet one. Then you've got bombardment combat, and this is where the supply matters, or one of the ways the supply matters. So you can see here, if you're supplied, you spend 1. If you're in the yellow, limited supply, you spend 2. And if you're in strained, you spend 3. Then you spend an extra 1 if you use a heavy artillery marker with the 10th or 11th Army. And because the 10th and 11th are in this area here. And, you know, so if you slid that over, you see that's 11th Army. Okay. Then assault, right? I remember I said assault's not the same as movement, although it does involve moving into the adjacent enemy occupied space. So I'm going to do this actually, but I wanted to talk about it first. 2 action points for normal assault combat, 1 AP to add to do it with a storm battalion with the 14th or Isonzo Army, and 3 to do it with the 10th or 11th. So the terrain up here, I suspect, was tougher, and also probably these units weren't as heavily supplied as this area over here. These are the more elite forces of the Central Powers here along closer to the coast, of course, as you can see. Then you have regrouping, which again, based on supply, 1 for green, 2 for yellow, 3 for red, and you get 1 if you don't have your line of communications, which is just a trace back to these first boxes here, first spaces, I should say. So if this guy came down here and got here, or maybe here, and then somehow the Italians got behind him and got here, that would cut his line of communication back to his, assuming he couldn't trace through this way, then he would have no line of communications, which is not something you want to have, because it does add 1 action point. And then you can remove a blown bridge marker, which is something that the Allies or the Italians can do once they fall back to the river lines. You see rivers all along here. There's one here, 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 and here. This is the Piave line here, which is their secondary line where they historically halted the Central Powers attack. Okay, and then after that, we do the Allies, which are driven by the cards. Then you'll have bombardment combat, assault combat, things like that, that are talked about in detail here on the player aid card. Okay, so one thing I want to mention is I didn't do this, and I may now be out of order, but we're playing the On to Rome scenario, which is the main one. There's also a kind of starter one here called On to the Piave. which is shorter and doesn't use the 10th or 11th Army. So all of this stuff over here is left out, and you're just basically pushing this way. It's a more limited game, 5 turns. So this one is the main full game 10-turn scenario. You can see here it says, before the normal start to game turn 1, conduct a special dawn assault phase, and I forgot to do this. This is to simulate the heavy artillery bombardment and gas attack Central Powers hit the Italian trench lines with before the assault started. Place all preliminary bombardment markers. Use the opposite side of the heavy artillery markers in any space adjacent to a CP unit from the 14th or Isonzo armies at no AP cost. Then roll 4 dice to resolve each bombardment combat. Use all the heavy artillery procedures, so we'll get to see that. Except that die rolls of 1 have no special effect. So when you roll a 1 on heavy bombardment, you actually lose that artillery unit. After resolution, flip the markers back over to the heavy artillery and place them back into the available marker pool of markers, which I forgot to fill. They're up here. These are the storm battalions. And these are the heavy artillery, which are going to go out here on the board. Right? So we've got 1, 2, 3, 4, 5 areas, it looks like to me, because I think this up here, yeah, that's the 10th. So we're talking about the 14th starts here, and then these 2 are the Isonzo. So you've got 5 spaces that we can attack. And there's 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. Now, when doing bombardment or assault combat, you also want to check the defense rating of the place you're attacking. And when you have more than 1 unit in a space, you have to choose which one you want to attack. So, for example, if we wanted to attack the city, we would have to say whether we want to attack the army unit or the garrison. Now, I'm going to put these out so we can choose our spots. And as it mentions, you've got your preliminary bombardment on the back. So we're gonna hit this area, this one, and I'm going to hit this one down here. And actually, we have 5, so we're going to hit all of them. Okay, so we'll hit all of them, and we have to roll 4 dice. Okay. Now, before I do that, I wanted to talk about the bombardment rules. So remember I was talking about the defense rating? In bombardment combat, what you're looking at is the terrain defense rating. So as you can see right here, you've got clear is 4, city, hills, or mountain is 5, and trenches are 5. Okay. I was using, that was the regular bombardment. We're actually using the heavy artillery rules. So we're ignoring this rolling a 1, but you can see here the attack space automatically has a terrain defense rating of 4, regardless of the actual terrain. And the normal combat effect of trenches is ignored. However, they still get the +1 morale rating when they're checking morale. Sorry, I had that a little bit out of frame. So I'm going to roll 4 dice. We need a 4. We need a 5 for a hit, and a 4 would be a 5 or a 6 for a hit, and a 4 would be a what's called a morale hit. So we're going to roll here, and we got 3 6s and a 2. So the 2, oh, and I guess we're starting up here. The 2 is obviously going to be ignored, but that would be 3 hits. Okay, so now let's talk about how you apply hits to a unit in combat. So you have hit markers, okay? Shaken, disrupted, depleted, and broken. First hit is shaken, which gives a -1 morale rating. Second is disrupted, which takes away a strength point and a -1 morale. Then depleted, which is what we would be getting here, is -2 strength, -1 artillery factor, -1 defense rating, and -1 morale rating. So that's fairly significant impact on the unit. And you can see here, this is a depleted marker. You can see the -2, the -1s, right? So we're just going to place that on here. Place it next to him, actually, I guess. Since we can, he's the only unit in there. I'm going to take that marker, flip it back to its available side, and put it there. And I will zoom in here for the after we do all of this. And I may actually cut this short after we finish this. And then we'll do the main turn afterwards. And so let's move on to this one, and we're going to roll 4 dice again. Okay, so And we got a 4, a 5, a 2, and a 3. So the 2 and the 3 are ineffective. The 5 is a hit, so they're going to get a shaken marker, which is this guy right here. And again, you can see the effects of the shaken marker. Okay, it doesn't do anything to any of them except its morale rating. Okay, so that's what would go on here. And now the morale hit, which is what the 4 would be, that's a little bit different than a regular hit. Okay, so here you have morale tests. So you have to take a morale test when they take a morale hit, and you can see its morale is increased by 1 if it has a trenches feature. Now they're firing from this space, and it's over a trench line which crosses the transit line, so that counts in terms of their morale. So their morale goes up by 1, but it also goes down by 1, so it's a null effect. And the morale is the number in the circle. So that is a 2, which means they need to roll a 2 or less to pass the morale test. Okay, so let's roll 1 die. And they failed. So because his morale is a 2, a morale hit becomes an actual hit, and this shaken marker would actually get flipped over to its disrupted side, which adds the -1 to his strength point, dropping that to a 2. Now, if we had gotten 2 morale, if his morale was a 3 or higher, you would need to roll 2 morale hits before you would actually take another real hit. Okay, so now let's move on to the 3rd unit, this guy right here. And we got just two hits, because there was a 6 and a 5. 6 and a 5, that's 2 hits. So he gets 2 hits here. So he gets the disrupted marker. Okay. Now here we're going to target the unit, not the garrison. We will have to deal with the garrison if we assault that hex at some point, but for right now we don't. And oops, that was only 2. Let's roll the other 2. No hits. So this guy escapes unscathed, buckled down, covered up in their trench lines in the city and avoided any damage. So that just leaves this one down here. They're in clear terrain too. And they get 2 hits and a morale hit. So the 2 hits would put them at disrupted. And then we may end up with, actually, it's this guy down here. So now we roll 1 die. And a 6 is always a hit, and a 1 is always a pass. They pass, always on a 1. They can't go lower than a 1. And that is a 2, so they actually do pass. Their morale is actually a 4. They do get the +1 with the -1 offset. So they needed a 4 to pass, and they did. So no harm, no foul. And it would have taken 2 morale hits anyway to add another hit to that unit, because they have morale higher than 3. Okay, that ends that, and now we would move to our activation phase. I'm just gonna keep the 12. I mean, technically, I should have done this part before we started the actual turn, but in this case, I don't think that's a big deal. But I am going to actually wrap up this video right now, and then we'll come back. So you can consider this like the setup and then the special preliminary bombardment for the campaign game. But we are going to come back very soon with even more gameplay. So there'll be a second gameplay video here coming up probably in a day, 2 at the most. So for now, that's going to do it. I do want to thank my channel members before I do anything else. That is Tom Marshall and Guardian. They are both tier 2 countered tier. And yes, you can support the channel by becoming a member. It is relatively inexpensive, $1 or $3 a month, essentially. And yeah, if you want to do that, that's great. I would appreciate it, but it's not like you really. No pressure, I guess, is what I'm saying. Anyway, thank you to those guys, and thank you as well simply for watching. And also, if you would consider supporting the channel by liking, sharing, and/or subscribing, that'd be great as well. If you're already a subscriber, thank you for that. But we are done here. If you have any comments, questions, etc., you know what to do. Put them in the comment section. Otherwise, I am going to wrap it up. Until next time, I'm Joe. This is the Hexed Encounter channel. And as always, happy gaming.